Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining our Food Power webinar. My name is Maddie, and I'll be the host of the webinar this afternoon, based at Sustain in London. Before we get into the details of it, I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me. So if you can hear me, over on the left-hand side of your screen, there should be a list of everyone who's in the webinar, and there'll also be something called the attendee chat. So if you can hear me, can you just type in and say hi and where you're listening from? If you are having any issues connecting, we usually recommend using Chrome, as this can be one of the best browsers for it. Okay, we've got some people. It looks like a few people are listening, so that's good. So we've got, hi, Emily. Oh, Haley is from Baltimore. That's fun. I'm from Vermont, so not too far away. Hackney, Colchester, Carlisle, Northamptonshire, Edinburgh, Bangor, Bristol, Wales, Plymouth, Aberdeen, another Bristol, Sunderland, Greenwich, Belgium. All right. Great to have another person from the Netherlands. This is great. Okay, great. So it sounds like most people's sound is working. If not, Any Meeting is the name of the website we're using, and they have a really good support section, but Chrome is your best bet otherwise. So during the webinar, if anyone has any questions, we like to use this chat box on the left-hand side that you're typing in where you're from. And this is where you can ask any questions of me or any of the presenters, and you can also share information with anyone else. So it's public, anything you type in there, and everyone can see it. But I also try to repeat all of the questions out loud for the recording. And you're welcome to also share contact info or links to projects or anything like that. The webinars often turn into a really great opportunity to connect with other people who might be working on similar projects or topics or things in your area or elsewhere. And if you are working on food poverty and want to find an academic, or an academic wants to find someone in the third sector, maybe this is the golden opportunity. At the top of your screen, you'll also see that there's a button that says Ask a Question. It's a green button. If you want to ask me a question in private, or any of the other presenters a question in private, you can send us a question that way. But otherwise, we're really happy for the questions to be public. As I mentioned, the webinar will be recorded, and that'll include all of the sound as well as the slides. And we'll post a link to this on our webinar page on the Food Power website in the next day or two. And we'll also send an email to everyone who's attended with this link, so you can check it out that way as well. Okay, so that's all the housekeeping from me. So I'm based at Food Power, and we're run an organization. We're a UK-wide program that's delivered by Sustain, the Alliance for Better Food and Farming, in partnership with Church Action on Poverty, and it's funded by the Big Lottery Fund. The aim of Food Power is to strengthen communities' ability to reduce food poverty by tackling its root causes at the local level. And we work with about 50 local partnerships, or what we call alliances, that are based in different areas around the UK. Over the last 2.5 years, almost 3 years now, we've been working to create a peer learning network, develop and share solutions among these different alliances and partnerships. And one of the ways that we do that is through the webinars. One of the other things we do is offer financial support for key activities, such as developing food poverty action plans. We run regional learning networks, have a peer mentoring scheme, and then have a lot of resources, advice, and other things on our website for people we support and just anyone who'd like to check it out. So we would suggest seeing the website if you want more info about what we do and how to get involved. Today, we wanted to put on a webinar that was about working with academics, because a lot of the partnerships that we work with around the country either have academics as a part of their alliance or have worked with them on specific one-off projects. And the amount of engagement and partnership between can vary quite a bit. It might just be a small one-off project to do an evaluation or to do some research on food poverty in the area, or it might be that the university kind of is one of the leaders of the partnership. So we'll hear a little bit about a range of that today. We've got 4 different speakers spread out all over. So we've got Joe and Val, who are in Middlesbrough. Then we have Rebecca in Exeter and Maddie in York. So I'm going to pass it over to them in just a moment, but if you have any questions during their presentation, feel free to type it into the box on the left. They probably won't answer it during their session, but I'll make a note of it, and we'll get to it during the Q&A at the end of the session. But if it's a quick thing that I can answer, or if someone else wants to chime in and anyone else knows the answer, please do so. The hyperlinks if there's any hyperlinks in the slides, they won't work. So I'll put those links into the chat box as well and share them afterwards as well. So I think that is it for me. And I'm going to pass over to Joe and Val.
Right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Joe and I are going to talk about Middlesbrough Environment Cities experience. Oh, hang on, how do I move on? Oh, we've already got a glitch. There we are. Right, with you now. Right, starting again. So Joe and I are going to talk about Middlesbrough Environment Cities experience of working with Teesside University. And this is developed mainly through the work of the Food Partnership and also workplace health, but other opportunities have sort of presented themselves along the way. And it's important for us to say, I suppose, at this point that we recognise that not all universities will have the same attitude as Teesside, and we do appreciate, that our experience may be very different. But it's good to be able to share it with you. So just a little bit about who we are. So Middlesbrough Environment City is an independent charity, and we work with local communities, public bodies and the private sector to tackle health inequalities and promote healthy and sustainable lifestyles. So the key areas that we work in are home energy efficiency, food growing, healthy cooking, cycling, walking, outdoor play. And we also chair the South Tees Affordable Warmth Partnership and Middlesbrough Food Partnership and Middlesbrough Food Power Alliance. So MEC is a small organisation. So we currently have around 33 employees, and we have apprentices as well. We would view our relationship with the university as one where we can sort of mutually benefit from an exchange of sort of our expertise, with our strengths being related to sort of our asset-based approach, the ability to engage with local communities and to work alongside them, sort of co-producing projects and working to a model of sustainability and empowerment, and sort of the real life opportunities that this offers to the university and to their students, which is something that Joe's going to talk a little bit more about. And obviously in return, we gain from the university their expertise in research and evaluation, and which I'm sure if you're from sort of third sector organisations, you can appreciate how valuable evaluation is when we want to strengthen our funding bids and also demonstrate sort of how we contribute to the development of the evidence base. And it's good for us because it helps us to know that the work that we do is effective and it contributes to reducing health inequalities as well as tackling environmental issues. So I'm going to hand over to Joe, who's going to tell you a little bit more about the detail of some of the work we've done.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, yeah, we have a number of examples where collaborative working with universities has generated mutual benefits, and sort of how these kind of come about, as with all kind of partnership working, is nurturing relationships over time. So there's no real difference there, but relationships can take time to develop. And what has really helped this is having numerous members of Teesside University staff in numerous departments as food partnership members. And so they kind of, what that does is that really helps to cement and so they can see the value of the work of the food partnership and what the various other partners are doing. They really value that. But then it also provides an opportunity to see potential opportunities for partnerships, for the partnership, but also for specific partners as well. So there's mutual benefit kind of happening there. But it also opportunities can arise through potential opportunities like trustees. And the chair of the Middlesbrough Food Partnership was also student union trustee for 8 years. He wasn't quite sure of the opportunities that this might bring, but it's kind of by putting yourself in those kind of situations, you maybe create something. But then in return as well, we've also had a Teesside University director on the MEC board, and so MEC, Middlesbrough Environment City, is leading the food partnership. So there's a real kind of understanding, a mutual understanding kind of going along there. But it's kind of being open to exploring other opportunities sort of further. So for example, sort of academic partners are able to interpret potential opportunities, whereas the third sector might not be able to kind of see them. And there's one at the moment where there's a public health practice evaluation scheme that has been drawn to our attention by a university a member of staff that we might not necessarily have kind of seen that as an opportunity to kind of maybe go for some funding on that one. So there's kind of things happening there. And then there's that relationship between the partnership and the university is you kind of have to understand what the partner needs to achieve. So a number of the food partnership initiatives support the university health and wellbeing programme, and have done for a number of years now. And recently that really good relationship between that member of staff and the food partnership has developed a project called the Veg Patch, which we'll mention a bit later on, or you can find out a bit more through the Veg Cities work that we're doing at the moment, which has helped both parties achieve their goals, but wouldn't actually been possible on their own. So it's very, very beneficial on that one. And then the workplace health programme, Extra Life, which is delivered by the Middlesbrough Council Public Health Department, who is also a food partnership partner. Have worked with a variety of large settings, including the university, on a variety of themes. And the public health saw that the partnership work delivered by the partners is a fantastic mechanism to achieve the goals and broaden the scope of their work. But then the food partnership also saw this as a fantastic opportunity for collaborative working with public health and the Extra Life partners, as an opportunity to support our whole food system approach across numerous sectors. And so we are embedding the work that we're doing within numerous different settings, different sectors, different businesses, different departments, for much greater impact. So that seemed to work very, very well. And then most of the benefits that we're now discussing are kind of because universities recognise that graduate employability is a major issue. And the experiences that some students can gain within workplaces are invaluable. So Middlesbrough Environment City and the Food Partnership have been asked to deliver presentations to students, and we get to talk about environmental issues, raise awareness of the work that we do, and then offer volunteering opportunities there. And this is a great opportunity for students when they do have a volunteering opportunity to gain experience of supporting the delivery of practical work, but also obtaining current knowledge related to their subject and the working on real life sort of examples, live projects that they might not necessarily been able to do, and great volunteering opportunities benefiting their CVs. But then there's also that kind of thing about sort of experience of working in partnership with outside organisations and a whole variety of employment skills and experience. For example, we've got a couple of nutritional students who want to enhance their CVs with volunteering work, and an MSc occupational therapist student that's also wanting to help evaluate a forest school's food growing programme as well. So there's lots of opportunities there. And then in terms of internships, you know, there's a fairly active internship scheme going on with Teesside universities, where a couple of times a year the university will offer local organisations the opportunity to apply to host an intern, and it might be a third year or graduate or a second year student, and then that basically can be offered for a 6 to 10 week placement with the university funding the intern. And this is a fantastic opportunity for voluntary sector organisations in particular to have a small piece of work sort of either evaluated or kind of going through that process of establishing a project to capture sort of important data linked to a project. So it's a fantastic opportunity there. And I think it's back to Val.
Yep. One thing that we're really looking forward to is that we're going to have a PhD student as an embedded researcher, and we think that's going to be a real good opportunity for us. Fatima's going to join us in the autumn, and her interest is in food poverty. So she's got a lot of knowledge, but a lot of the data it's mainly sort of quantitative data. But when she comes and joins us, she's going to have the opportunity to really get some of that qualitative and do focus group work And we just see that'll be a real good opportunity for us for mutual learning, really. And I think we'll both find it challenging, so I think that's a real good opportunity. We also have past experience of working with MSc students, and we've got a couple of examples where one of the students for their in their third year undertook a study into the food deserts in Middlesbrough, and they were able to do some really interesting work for us, and actually sort of provide us with some real insight to where the deserts were, and for us then to sort of look at how we might address that. We also benefited as well because the student had the input from their tutor as well, so it ended up being very useful information for us. Likewise, the balanced scorecard. Another undergraduate student worked to create an evaluation tool so that they could evaluate the success of the food partnership by looking at the aims of the food action plan. So they developed tools, and we were able to use that as a partnership to really look at the effectiveness and identify gaps. We have more information on that if anybody would be interested in knowing more about it. I suppose, as Joe mentioned, the Veg Patch project and Edible Campus, they're both opportunities, really, I think, where network has developed and opportunities for joint working. So the Veg Patch project is actually where there is a stall each week on campus where students are selling at whatever price people want to pay fresh vegetables, fruit and vegetables. And that initiative has really developed from conversations that we've had around the Food Partnership and in the Food Power Alliance. And it's a real good opportunity. It's a real partnership where we've got one of the local stores providing the food, but also local growers, in particular Incredible Edibles, are going to provide any surplus fruit and veg. And we've linked that into then doing cooking skills and food hygiene training on the campus. And also the next step will be the Edible Campus, which is linked into Incredible Edibles, where they will be looking at growing food at various places all around the campus, which I think is a real move forward, particularly when you're looking at students and how they're managing their budgets and access to sort of healthy food. So I think we're come to the end of our examples. Yes, so it'll be we'll hand over now to Rebecca.
Thanks, Val. Thanks, Joe. Oops, sorry. Thanks, Val and Joe. We're now going to hear from Rebecca, who's based in Exeter.
Thank you. I hope everyone can hear me okay. Thanks for having me on today to talk about the collaborative work I've been undertaking with Food Exeter, and in particular our Food Power funded work to address household food insecurity in the city. This programme of work has been taken forward by Food Exeter's Fair Access to Food Working Group. I'm using the term household food insecurity here in order to focus on the wide net of causes behind a lack of access to food or access to facilities for cooking, plus the challenges of malnutrition caused by the prevalence of calorie-dense, cheap food. For a great discussion on these terms, check out Megan Blake's blog, geofoodie.org. In this presentation, I'll briefly set out what we mean by engaged research and co-producing knowledge, specifically in community food and food policy related research. Then I'll talk about how this relates to Food Power Alliances and the benefits and challenges of collaboration. And I'll go on to give an example of how academic alliance partnerships are working together through recent work with Food Exeter. Academic partner collaborations enable knowledge production barriers to be broken down, which is extremely important in fields of research but seeking to have direct impact on community policies and programmes. Listening and learning from people with lived experiences and from frontline community organisations who support them is vital in order to find workable and deliverable solutions to these issues, such as household food insecurity. Practitioner and community knowledge is key for academics seeking to know more about and address household food insecurity. The diagram here is called the ladder of participation, developed by the Think Local, Act Personal programme. As the ladder of participation shows, real co-production occurs when users have an equal voice and equal power in projects. Within academia, many scholars are seeking to balance power and knowledge with partners by carrying out engaged research, such as within the Participatory Geographies Research Group, the People's Knowledge Collective at Coventry University, Durham University Centre for Social Justice and Community Action, plus others. Part of co-production involves an engaged research approach, including processes to co-design research programmes, as well as working alongside each other to design project actions, workshops, reports, and more. By creating research projects alongside partners, the voices and experiences of partners are foregrounded, which not only shapes research objectives, methodologies, and project outputs, it helps to break down the divide between academic knowledge and people's knowledge. I call myself a scholar activist, and taking this approach means working alongside participants and partners and engaging with their issues and concerns, whilst also gathering evidence for research. Multi-stakeholder partnerships increasingly act as an important link between communities and policymakers in order to implement community-appropriate programmes. Food power alliances provide opportunities for a range of actors to work together to address household food insecurity. Partnership working has the potential to promote better understanding of localised food and health issues, as well as co-producing locally applicable solutions. Food power alliances operate within localised contexts that create distinctive challenges and opportunities. By linking together divergent organisations and using co-productive approaches, food power alliances can share resources and knowledge to work towards food justice and create greater access to food. The Food Power Network also enables knowledge sharing to take place at regional and national levels as well. There are many benefits of research partnerships, both for academics and for community organisations. However, in order to run a successful research project, academics need to be very responsive to the needs of partners. In particular, academics need to be sensitive to the goals and ethos of research partners and to the needs of partners' service users when involved in collaboration. Certain disciplines such as geography, sociology, anthropology, and public health have a strong history of this way of working. Certain subdisciplines that value participatory action research methods will be more attuned to these requirements than others. It is important for academics to recognise and address power imbalances in their relationships with partners, as well as reflect on their own positionality. Academics can help leverage engagements with decision makers and lend credibility to evidence-gathering processes and project outputs such as reports and recommendations. But benefits work both ways, as partnering with community organisations assists academics to engage with people with lived experiences and service providers. This enables real insights for academics into critical issues affecting disadvantaged people, such as those experiencing household food insecurity.
My Food Power Link research partner is Food Exeter, which is a sustainable food city and food power alliance. It was established in 2015 with the aim to share good practices and resources and to build up synergy to develop new action to address food issues in Exeter. Its Fair Access to Food programme has recently been working to bring together city-based partners to address household food insecurity. Food Exeter organisations cover a range of services focused on community, food and health. In 2016, it has established a steering group, launched a food strategy in 2017, and in recent months has achieved charitable status as a CIO or Charitable Incorporated Organisation. The involvement of public sector and frontline service partners in Food Exeter has been constrained in recent times due to funding and capacity pressures. Other potential collaborators have also not been able to work with us due to their own time and logistical challenges. Co-production is therefore determined by who has been invited to join the conversation and who has the capacity to join time-intensive collaborative processes of knowledge gathering and implementing programmes. In 2018, Food Exeter was awarded funding from the Food Power programme to begin work to investigate food poverty in Exeter and initiate a collective multi-agency response. The work has been led by the Fair Access to Food Working Group, whose membership is made up from a range of organisations linked to Food Exeter. During 2018, we collected data, listened to people with lived experiences, and gained the input of local agencies. We held an initial workshop to gather information on emergency food provision in the city and ran a multi-stakeholder cross-city food poverty summit in November. The research and subsequent food poverty summit were supported by the University of Exeter through a funding award secured by myself, and I led on undertaking research with clients of the Exeter Food Bank. Plus, I analysed the rest of the data gathered by Karen Inwood, Food Exeter's coordinator. This data included a dashboard on food poverty in Exeter, which was made possible by the collaboration of Public Health Devon in our alliance and was specially created at our request. This slide shows a map of emergency food provision in Exeter, which was created by a volunteer in the early stages of our Food Power work, following a consultation process with local charities and organisations. It was for us a great way to establish our alliance by creating a useful and effective resource for all partners to access and to share with their clients. So, as I hope I've been made clear, there are many benefits to academic alliance partnerships. Academics may be able to access small pots of university impact funding. The benefit of impact focus funding is that it does not prioritise research itself, but supports knowledge exchange and supporting partners. Academics are trained in knowledge gathering and the analysis of evidence. Academic findings are rigorous and respected, which may increase engagement with decision makers. Working with food power alliances enables academics to create greater research impacts than they would working alone. There is the potential for higher visibility of core findings for academics as a greater range of audiences are reached. This also helps academics to meet Research Council's requirements of demonstrating impact in their research. However, there are challenges to this approach. Food power alliances need to be sure that academic partners are closely aligned with their values and agendas. Academics need to know when to listen and to support rather than lead, especially when considering sensitive issues affecting disadvantaged partners and people with lived experiences. The limited capacities of some food power alliances can result in the academic being overwhelmed with the needs of the alliance. Successful engagement requires significant time and commitment,
and this is not always valued by universities. So, as we've been discussing today, there are multiple benefits of forming academic alliance partnerships. There are many examples of positive collaborations across a number of food power alliances, sustainable food cities, and Feeding Britain projects. Co-produced programmes of action on food poverty involving community and academic research creates knowledge that carries weight and is rooted in community. Through this approach, we aim to create meaningful and effective change in food policy and programmes at a local level. So yeah, I'd just like to extend my thanks to my research partners in particular for enabling me to work in this way. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Rebecca. This is very interesting. We're now going to have our third speaker, Maddie from York.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me here. So in some ways, my talk, I think, follows on quite well from Rebecca's, because within our alliance, so our alliance is the York Food Poverty Alliance, and academic involvement is fundamental to the alliance, largely because I am the chair of the alliance and I'm employed by the University of York. And the reasons for this were quite organic, but this is the effect, essentially. So we have multiple partners, and we have the two major universities in York in the alliance. Pragmatically, in terms of how the alliance works in its relation to university, I divide my time between working on alliance work and working on my other academic projects. And what I want to really talk about in this talk is the kind of pros and cons of how that works in practice, and how the kind of the pragmatic elements of working with the university and with grassroots projects. Right. So the pros and cons of academics leading food poverty alliances. There are many pros that have kind of come up as we've gone along. So capacity, often staff are free. So for instance, I work pro bono on the Food Poverty Alliance, and I'm employed by the University of York. So that saves us a huge amount of money, which we then use to employ other staff. Facilities can also be free. So free room hire, free printing, free stationery, all of which really would add up if we were paying for them. With our alliance, the university has been quite positive about the cross-sector partnership that's come out of this relationship between the University of York and multiple third sector organisations in York. And so they've helped with publicity by putting announcements about the alliance development on their website, on project websites. So nothing really big, but work that's been helpful. It's created opportunities for networking with other academic groups, and kind of networking is fundamental to academic work, and the university is very supportive of all of the work that we do within and outside of the university around the alliance. There is, I sort of pause over that because I think it's questionable the extent to which credibility that comes with a large academic institution, and that credibility has probably helped us in forging alliances with other large institutions like the local council or other large traditional organisations like the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. It's difficult to know the extent to which, but it's probably eased the development of those partnerships. As has been mentioned, it certainly opens up additional sources of funding and support. So there are many academic pots of funding, which I'll come on to in a minute, that you can access as an academic for partnership work and for impact work. And those wouldn't be available without the relationship strongly in the university. And expertise. I also kind of pause over this one because there is expertise that clearly comes from academia and being an academic within this area. My own background is in food insecurity research, but whether that expertise is always relevant or useful in a grassroots context, I think is questionable and could be something that we consider kind of in the chat. Cons. Okay, so there may be free labour, free capacity, but actually there are still research expectations. So in my circumstance, I'm employed as a researcher. So while I may engage with and lead the alliance, ultimately I'm expected to produce research. and how that then is balanced with doing everything that you might need to do as part of a grassroots alliance is questionable. There's a huge amount of bureaucracy and administration within institutions like academic institutions, and this can complicate hiring staff and funding projects. So in our situation, we decided not to hire staff through the university itself because the overheads were so high that it would eat up a huge amount of our money. So we hire staff as freelancers. So they're associated with the university, but they're not part of it. Again, what we found with funding projects is that actually there can be a huge amount of administration to grants and the administration of grants to freelancers outside the university. And this is complicated work and slowed down work. As an alliance embedded within the university, we've done lots of research, as partly my expertise has sort of been the cause for that. But for all this research, we require ethics approval. And while this is very good for the credibility of the research, it very much slows down the project. So if our project is funded for a year, actually, we might be spending 5 months or so getting through the whole ethics approval process. And in the course of that, we might actually change the research project because it's required by the ethics committee that we do. There's a question whether actually, because you're embedded within an academic institution and you might be seen as being detached from what's going on the ground, you actually have less credibility than someone outside academia. I'm not sure about that, but certainly there are perceptions that you could. And then finally, I think there can be a tension between being an academic and working from an academic position and meeting the needs of people in food poverty. So as an academic, you're taught to analyze, you're taught to critique, and that's in some ways your role, whereas actually people need help with food now. So I think kind of balancing those two priorities can often be difficult. Okay, accessing funding. I think a key benefit for working with academics is that you can access pots of funding that you otherwise might not be able to. And there can be lots of funding available within the academy. This funding can be available for research, particularly action research, public engagement and networking. And universities are keen to support collaborations between academics and third sector partners. So they're keen for research that looks outside the academy, and they're keen to promote impact of research. Sometimes you have to be careful about how you see impact, because impact within a REF framework can actually be purely about kind of journal citations of paper. It actually isn't what we see as impact on the ground. So there can be a tension there. But in terms of funding, it does have challenges, because often funding, even though it has an impact element, the majority of it can be research focused. So the medium and large grants are primarily research focused. And that may not really fit with the priorities of alliance work, which is about practice and kind of grassroots initiatives. Again, if it's research that's funded by an academic institution, there's often a high expectation about the quality of that research. So it needs to be rigorous, it needs to be up to a standard that you can publish it in journals. And again, this might be research that takes a huge amount of time and a huge amount of capacity. And actually it's not really aligned with the alliance priorities of understanding a problem, but that's it really. And then finally, some of the grants that you might look to or try and get actually have very long timeframes in terms of the application process and hearing about when you'll get access to funding. So if the funding for your alliance itself is a year or 2 years, that may not align at all with the work that you're doing in the alliance itself. So in York, we gained a small amount of money from the Centre for Future Health at the University of York. And it was £2,000, and it was designed to do an action research project. So the project was about training up people with lived experience of food insecurity, food poverty in smartphone journalism. And then they would go away and document their own experiences of food poverty using their smartphones, which would be then collectively edited at the end. And this suited the priorities of the particular funder because it was action research and public engagement. It was, on balance, a successful project, but there were lots of difficulties in how it happened. So in order to access the funding, we had to get through university ethics, which meant that we ended up changing the design of the research slightly because of consent about who could be in the videos. most of the funding was gained to pay another member of staff who was a freelancer, and channeling the money through the university to that other member of staff was very complicated and required lots of administration and changes, and it wasn't something that university was used to doing. So on balance, it's good to get the money, but the challenges can be significant and the process can be quite slow. One thing that I've often considered as a leader of the Alliance, but someone with a research background and inclined towards research, is the balance between research and practice within Alliance development. And so maybe that implicates how you want to liaise or partner with universities. As an Alliance embedded within the university, we've done lots of research. That's partly my expertise, that's partly the expectations of the university, and that's partly priorities of the Alliance members. In terms of why we should do research, so it has been crucial to understanding food poverty in the area of York, and there was certainly a desire among all the Alliance members to have a greater sense of what was happening. And there was an argument that unless you understand food poverty in the area, you can't really tackle it. Research can be really important in actually not only understanding what food provision is in the city, but improving it and changing it. So like Exeter, we have a map of the food organisations in the city, and we can develop that as we want, but it's also been a good opportunity to then recruit new members. So going out and finding what's going on has been an opportunity to say, this is what we're doing. We found that research actually can be a good way to bring people together. So within our Alliance, people are quite concerned about food insecurity among children and families. So we coordinated members around conducting a survey, and the survey was very successful. We conducted it through schools, and various Alliance members contacted their schools and liaised with their schools about the delivery of the survey. And so we got about 25 schools on board and about 650 survey responses. And that was because of the collaboration around this particular common goal. And then finally, I mean, research is kind of fundamental to funding applications. So if you can show the scale of a problem in an area, then you're probably more likely, perhaps, to get funding at a later stage. I mean, certainly that would work for academic work, but it also probably applies to third sector work. But I think the practice about the reality about research-free practice is difficult, because there is a question about why you're doing the research and whether the research will have impact. I mean, it's good to know something, but actually if you're devoting your resources to research when you really need to be doing something, that can bring up lots of tensions. And I think that's been something that we face in our Alliance, about the extent to which we want to know about a problem or do things about the problem. And when capacity is limited, that's quite tricky. Again, research takes time. The timescales can be very long, particularly within the academy, and food poverty is very present. So again, it's a question of, do we look to understand something better and really get to the roots of what's going on, or do we just address it? And then finally, I think within alliances, there can be a tension between those who have expertise in research and want to do research, and those who actually just want to do, and doing is what they know and what they think is the best practice. And how you bring those together can be difficult. And I don't think there's an easy solution. Okay, and that's me done. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Maddie. That's a great way to end it. Just being like, I don't think there's an easy solution. Yeah, I think you're probably dead on. I appreciate the honesty of the speakers too, kind of talking about the pros and cons. I think is really useful. And things like, there is access to funding, but there can be a lot of bureaucracy, or like timelines of ethics approval, and the knowing versus doing balance, I think is a really tricky one to strike, I imagine, within alliances. Okay, we've had some questions come in on the chat, so I'm just going to go through. The first two were for Val and Joe. Simon was wondering if you could say what the name of the funded internship scheme was and maybe share that. And then Emily was also wondering if you could explain a bit more about what an embedded researcher is and how that was set up.
Hi there. Yeah, so in terms of the graduate intern scheme, we think it's called the graduate intern scheme at Teesside University. I don't think it has any other name than that. I mean, I suppose, again, just sort of to learn a bit more about it, do a search for Teesside University graduate intern scheme, and that should sort of pop up in the search engine. So sorry, I can't be more enlightening on that one. Do you want to talk about the embedded researcher?
Yeah, I mean, with the embedded researcher, I mean, it's a new experience for us, really, and I think it is taking time to be put in place. I think from the bureaucracy side, I think there has to be a lot of work done prior to us, Fatima, starting. So we were expecting it to start early this year, and actually it's going to be in the autumn. So we're not quite sure what the issues are, but we do know that it does take time to sort it out. And then when she's with us, from what we understand, then she'll be able to be based with us for about 2 to 3 days a week. And we understand that she is sort of funded into that post, and she'll be developing her sort of research question alongside sort of working with us. So we'll sort of be supporting her as she does that. That's really where we are with it, isn't it? I think.
Yeah. So is she a PhD, Val?
Yes, she's doing a PhD.
And is the PhD sort of about the work that you're doing on food poverty at your organization?
Yeah, well, she's done a lot of work already looking at food poverty, and I think she's particularly interested in.
Yeah, so it's under the guidance of Amelia Lake, and it's all about kind of the food environments relating to kind of the obesogenic environments and things like that. And so I think her research is relating to food environments, poverty, sort of and grey literature around sort of food poverty. So I think she's at the moment developing a question, but there was a whole problems with the university and an agreement and all of the various paperwork and stuff like that, which wasn't sorted in time before, and then it was deemed that by the time it would be sorted, there'd only be a month or so left before the holidays and all of this kinds of stuff. So that's kind of how it's sort of come about.
And it was when we were forming the Alliance that Amelia and Fatima were interested and wanted to sort of look at the opportunity. So it did really arise from the discussions around the Alliance developing.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. We had 2 other questions that came up that I think anyone could maybe jump into. One was from Emily, and she said, does anyone else have concerns over, quote, free capacity? We're careful not to use unpaid interns, only paid schemes to research food poverty because of the poverty and inequality implications. Though we do happily offer up research projects to form part of people's courses and keep a list of our research needs on our website. That was the first question. And then the other one was around, Gemma asked, how do you successfully map the food provisions in the city? Does anyone want to jump in about either the concerns around free labor, really, and
I'll jump in on that. I couldn't agree more. I think it's really important in this sector not to have anyone doing anything unpaid. So in terms of my role, I'm just fortunate that my employer will let me work on the Food Poverty Alliance as well as working on my academic work, and that's partly because the two are joined together. But I think it's sort of integral to the ethics of any organisation that we don't. Otherwise, we're just entrenching what we're trying to get rid of.
Could I come in on that one as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, so just it is a really messy process from my experience, because I'm sort of still an early career researcher. There's times when I'm paid, like funding, so I'm paid to work with Food Exeter, and there's times I'm just doing it as a volunteer. So it is a very messy process, and I just try and keep a balance on that one, really.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think many organizations struggle to find that balance. Val or Joe, did you want to say anything on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, we do offer volunteering opportunities, and I think it can be a win-win, really. I know a lot of people that have benefited really well from sort of volunteering. We would always sort of support them. So I feel that there's a lot to be there's a lot that you can benefit from with future employment just from those opportunities. And obviously, I think it's important that you don't exploit anybody, but I do think that there is the opportunity for to gain a lot from volunteering, and obviously within reason. But
I mean, it's not that there's funding there that's not been utilised and sort of keeping it back by trying to fill the post with volunteers. It's a case that I mean, for example, I mean, this kind of then follows on to that sort of the next question relating to the map, that it was actually through an intern program, through an intern that was supporting the food power work, that they then started researching the food provision within the town. And so that person was paid sort of through the internship. And then we were able to find some funding to keep her on. And she's now sort of still with us, sort of developing that work even further, relating to the Food Power Alliance. And so, yeah, it kind of, there are sort of opportunities that can then develop even further towards more paid work for that person.
Yeah, I just thought I could come in on that mapping one. Yeah, like Middlesbrough, it kind of relates to the previous question because, we held a workshop, so we were able to gather lots of evidence, but we had a volunteer who offered to create a map for us through, I think it's My Google Map, something like that. It's a website where you can, I haven't done it myself, but this volunteer created our map. And now, because she had got a degree from the university, she's now got herself an internship through the university to get some paid work with us. So yeah, like Val was saying, the volunteering can lead to some paid work that way.
Yeah, I think it's a tough one to find the balance between what are the boundaries between volunteering and unpaid internships, and then paid internships, and how do you determine if it's mutually beneficial or not, and to what extent. And I think each organization will have to kind of navigate that on their own, I guess, to see what suits them best. Francesca had a good question in here as well. And before I move on to it, I'll just say that Simon posted that Food Power did publish a short briefing called Mapping and Measuring Food Poverty in the Local Response, which has quite a bit around the specifics of creating online maps. If you go to the Food Power website and look under our publications page, you can find that. Francesca asked, a question comment from Hackney, how do we balance desire and outcome to work with experts by experience and co-production, so people with lived experience of food poverty, with time constraints of funding and project? It needs to be meaningful co-production and not tokenistic, but there's limited time. The tension has been touched upon in the presentations, but any more concrete practical insight from specific examples would be helpful. Does anyone have specific examples of working with people with lived experience of food poverty on a funded project and how they've navigated that, the time constraints?
I can come in briefly here. So on the Community Reporter project, that was essentially a kind of funded experts by experience project. And I think the main learning from that was just that it takes a huge amount of time to really develop any form of kind of sort of healthy network. So the project was funded for about 4 or 5 months, and we just had to, and within that time, we'd not recruited anybody at all, despite trying very hard. And we basically extended the funding by about 6 months beyond that point, just through negotiations. And by that point, we'd got 1 or 2 people who are really, really committed. And now the project is doing really well, but it's taken a huge amount of time. And essentially, it's taken a huge amount of kind of work with the person who's the project worker on the Food Poverty Alliance, has just working really closely with 1 or 2 people over the last sort of 2 or 3 months. And I think really the difficulty is that you can do things like focus groups fairly quickly that might fit funding schemes. But if you want to do anything more fundamental with people kind of genuinely contributing to the strategic direction of the Alliance and having complete agency in what they do, it takes a long time.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Maddie. And through our work at Food Power with working with people with lived experience of food poverty, we did a webinar on it in January as well with some of the groups like Newcastle and Blackburn with Darwin. We've been working on it for 1.5 years, and the major thing that we hear coming back from those groups is also just it's time. It's a really long process, and to make it valuable and beneficial to everyone involved, it's something that can't be rushed and kind of needs to be given a lot of space to develop and to make genuine connections with people. So I think that's definitely true.
Can I just jump in on that very very briefly, and just with Food Exeter, we're at the very sort of beginning of that journey. So we've had a year of the Food Power funding, and the upshot of that is we've now got some awards for all funding to take that side of the work forward. And then part of our funding is to work with community cafes, community centres to build capacity for community food hubs. And so we sort of dovetailed also with extra Food Power funding on working with experts by experience, because we can see that this could be potentially a really nice area to just begin those conversations and begin those relationships. So hopefully in 6 months to a year's time, we should be further down the line with that.
Yeah, I think that's exciting to have that kicking off in Exeter. Does anyone else have any questions from the chat? If not, we're coming up just to the end of 3:30. I hope these have been useful. We've got some people saying that they have been. I'd say for the volunteering versus internships, Emily's written that, you know, they have a volunteering program at Brighton and Hove, but specifically on internships, they don't feel like it's appropriate to offer them unpaid as they're not accessible to low-income students. And I think it's a really valuable point that Emily's made, that around, especially when working on issues of food poverty, thinking about how our own internal organizational labor practices are just important, kind of role modeling what we want to see elsewhere is really important. So again, everyone kind of has to find that sweet spot for themselves based on what they're working on particularly. But I will say we don't have any anything else coming up through here. So thanks to everyone who has joined us to speak. So thank you to Val and Joe and Maddie and Rebecca for joining us. Thanks to everyone who's attended. If you do have any questions, I'm going to leave the chat on for just a few more minutes. So if anyone wants to connect that way, they're very welcome to. As I said at the beginning, the webinar is recorded, and we'll put up the recording on our webinar webpage in a few days. We don't have any other webinars scheduled for the next month, but we normally hold them every month or two. So we'd encourage you to sign up to our newsletter so you can stay in touch about when the next ones are, or follow us on Twitter, or check out our website for more of that. So thanks again for joining us, and we hope this was helpful.